There are places on this planet where human beings do not truly belong, places that tolerate us only briefly before reminding us how fragile we are. 142 meters beneath the ocean's surface is one of those places. Sunlight cannot survive there. Sound feels distant and distorted. Pressure presses in from every direction, steady and merciless. It was in that world, silent, dark, and unseen, that Adam Rivers made his living. Adam was 38 years old and worked as a subsea structural inspection engineer, a specialist trained to examine the hidden skeletons of offshore industrial systems. While others worked on decks under open skies, Adam descended to the seabed to inspect foundations, pipelines, and joints that carried unimaginable weight. His job was to find the cracks no one else could see, the tiny failures that could turn steel giants into collapsing graves. It was precise work, lonely work, and Adam was very good at it. He trusted calculations more than people. Numbers did not disappoint you. Steel did not make promises it couldn't keep. Water followed rules. Life on land, however, felt messy and unresolved. 3 years earlier, his marriage had ended not in anger but in exhaustion. His wife had told him calmly and clearly that he was more present in the ocean than at home. Their daughter, Lena, was 9 now, growing quickly, learning to live without him. Adam spoke to her on the phone, sent messages, promised visits. He told himself it was enough. Somewhere deep down, he knew it wasn't. The ocean offered escape. Down there, nothing asked him emotional questions. There was only procedure, focus, and survival. Weeks at a time, Adam lived inside pressurized metal chambers, his body adapting to extreme depth. His voice changed under helium-rich air. His sleep followed artificial cycles. His world narrowed, and he welcomed it. In early March, Adam was stationed on an offshore platform hundreds of kilometers from the coast. The structure rose above the sea like a mechanical city, producing oil day and night. Beneath it, unseen by anyone on deck, lay a complex network of supports and pipelines anchored deep into the seabed. That unseen world was Adam's responsibility. On the morning of March 14th, he woke before the alarm, as he always did. The soft hum of life support systems filled the chamber. For a brief moment, he thought of Lena, wondered if she was awake, if she would remember her homework. The thought passed quickly. Work demanded focus. At 6:47 a.m., a knock echoed through the chamber door. The supervisor's voice followed, serious and controlled. Adam, we've got abnormal stress readings on the main subsea support line. We need a visual inspection immediately. Adam sat up, heart steady. Understood, he replied. As he began preparing for the descent, Adam believed this dive would be like all the others. Dangerous but manageable, calculated and controlled. He did not know that below the reach of light, beyond the limits of reason and expectation, something awaited him that would not only save his life but change the direction of it forever. Preparation followed a rhythm Adam knew by heart. He moved through the narrow corridors of the platform with calm efficiency, his body responding automatically to routines drilled into him over years of offshore work. Thermal layers first, then the reinforced outer suit, seals checked twice, gloves tested for flexibility. At this depth, even a minor oversight could become fatal. Around him, the platform was fully awake now, machinery humming, metal vibrating, voices echoing through steel walls. Offshore production never slept, and problems beneath the sea demanded immediate answers. In the equipment bay, Adam paused briefly as he passed other crew members. Some nodded in silent acknowledgement, others watched with the subtle respect reserved for those who worked below the surface. Among them was Yusuf Rahman, a quiet systems analyst known for his discipline and steady presence. Yusuf offered Adam a brief look and a simple nod, nothing more. Adam returned it without thought. At the time, Yusuf was just another colleague. Nothing about the moment felt significant. The dive briefing was short and precise. Sensors had detected unusual stress along a lower subsea support line. Nothing catastrophic yet, but enough to trigger concern. If the structure failed, The consequences would ripple upward, threatening the entire platform. Adam's task was straightforward: descend, visually inspect the joint, document any abnormalities, and return. No repairs, no heroics, just confirmation. At 7:23 a.m., Adam stepped into the subsea access capsule. The steel chamber was compact, functional, designed for survival rather than comfort. As the hatch closed behind him with a heavy metallic sound, the outside world vanished. Bolts sealed, pressure stabilized. The capsule detached from the platform and began its slow descent into the ocean's depths. "Capsule descending," came the voice from surface control. "Passing 30 meters, systems nominal." Adam acknowledged calmly, eyes fixed on the instrumentation panel. Through external cameras, he watched blue water darken as sunlight weakened. At 50 meters, colors began to drain from the world. At 80, the water pressed in more firmly, reminding him that the margin for error was narrowing. By the time the capsule passed 100 meters, the ocean outside was nearly black. Adam felt the familiar compression in his chest. Not pain, but presence. His breathing remained steady, controlled. This was where his work began. 142 meters, Control announced. "You're on the seabed." The capsule touched down gently, sending a muted vibration through its frame. Adam released the harness and stood, checking his umbilical connection: air supply, power, communications, all green. He took a final breath, steadying himself. "Preparing for exit," he said. When the hatch opened, cold rushed in instantly, sharp and unforgiving. Adam stepped out into the black water, helmet lights cutting narrow beams through suspended particles. The seabed stretched before him, uneven, industrial, littered with remnants of past operations. Massive supports rose from the sand like dark monuments. Adam activated his navigation system and turned toward the structure. "Beginning inspection," he reported calmly. Ahead of him, unseen and unmoving, the problem waited. Adam moved slowly toward the base of the subsea structure, each movement deliberate and economical. At this depth, speed was a liability. His helmet lights swept across the seabed, revealing a landscape shaped by years of industrial work. Abandoned cables half buried in sand, corroded brackets, tools long forgotten. Nothing down here was accidental. Everything existed because someone had once needed it, used it, and then left it behind. As he reached the lower support assembly, his instruments began to register what the surface sensors had hinted at. Stress patterns rippled across the metal in ways that made no sense for a structure of this age. These were not the slow fractures of time or corrosion. They were sharper, more recent, as if the steel had been pushed beyond its limits all at once. Adam adjusted his position, circling the joint carefully, recording images from multiple angles. "Control," he reported, his voice calm but precise. "I'm seeing abnormal stress propagation along the lower joint. This doesn't look localized." A brief pause followed before the reply came. "Copy that. Continue documentation. Maintain safe distance." Adam frowned slightly. Safe distance was a relative concept when the structure itself was compromised. He drifted sideways, careful not to disturb the surrounding sediment, and focused on the expansion joint connecting the pipeline to the support frame. A faint sheen of oil shimmered in the water, curling upward in slow, ghost-like spirals. Not enough to trigger alarms yet, but enough to confirm something was wrong. Then he felt it. A vibration passed through the water, subtle but unmistakable. It traveled through the steel beneath his boots and up into his chest, like the distant roll of thunder. Adam froze, every instinct sharpening at once. A second vibration followed, stronger this time. Before he could react, a sharp metallic crack split the silence. The expansion joint shifted, not violently, not dramatically, but enough. A section of the pipeline slid several centimeters, dislodging years of settled pressure. Sediment burst upward, clouding the water and swallowing his lights in swirling darkness. Adam kicked backward instinctively. The pull came instantly. His umbilical snapped taut, jerking him to a halt. The force twisted his body slightly and his heart slammed against his ribs. "Control!" Adam shouted. "Umbilical snagged!" The radio cut out mid-sentence. Only static answered. Adam turned sharply, following the line with his eyes. The thick hose was trapped between the shifted pipeline and a concrete frame, crushed into a narrow gap no human strength could overcome. He swam closer and pulled, adjusting angles, using the structure for leverage. The umbilical did not move even a millimeter. His gaze dropped to the oxygen gauge on his wrist. The number was falling, slowly at first, then faster. "That's not possible," he muttered, forcing himself to breathe evenly. The supply should have been constant. Damage meant leakage. Leakage meant time, very little of it. He checked his communicator again. Nothing. No signal. No response. Adam tried the emergency valve, twisting it firmly. It didn't budge. He tried again, harder this time. Still nothing. A cold realization settled into his chest as the gauge continued to drop. The structure had shifted into a perfect mechanical trap, and the ocean had closed around him without warning. For the first time since beginning the descent, Adam understood something with frightening clarity. This was no longer a problem to solve. It was a countdown. Time lost its familiar shape the moment Adam accepted that there was nothing left to fix. He hovered in the black water, suspended by the trapped umbilical, watching the oxygen gauge fall with a strange sense of detachment. 30%. The number felt unreal, like a statistic from someone else's life. He forced his breathing into a slow rhythm, aware that panic would only accelerate the inevitable. Around him, the ocean was silent, indifferent, unmoved by human urgency. Fine grains of sand drifted lazily through his helmet lights, glowing briefly before vanishing again, and the sight reminded him of dust floating through sunlight in a quiet room. Peaceful, almost gentle, despite the danger pressing in from every direction. Adam tried the emergency valve again, this time slowly, patiently, as if calm might persuade metal to cooperate. It didn't move. He released it and felt a faint tremor in his hand, not from fear, but from the weight of understanding. There were no backup procedures left, no overlooked switches, no clever solutions waiting to be discovered. The systems he had trusted his entire career had reached their limit. The ocean had decided otherwise. 25%. He leaned back slightly, allowing his body to relax against the pull of the tether, conserving what little energy remained. Fighting now would only steal time, and time was the one thing he could no longer afford to waste. He had always imagined death as something loud and violent, alarms screaming, metal tearing, chaos unfolding in seconds. Instead, it arrived quietly, wrapped in stillness. The structure above him no longer groaned. The seabed below lay undisturbed. The ocean did not rush him or threaten him. It simply existed, vast and impartial, reminding him that human presence here was temporary at best. 20%. The number dropped with soft inevitability, and with it came memories he had pushed aside for years. Lena's face surfaced in his mind with painful clarity. 9 years old, already changing faster than he could keep up with. He remembered the last time he had seen her, how she had been distracted, eager to return to her friends, and how he had felt hurt by that. Only now did he understand how unfair that feeling had been. She was growing up without him, adapting because she had to. He had promised her he would try to be around more, believing there would always be time to make good on that promise. 15%. Promises, he realized, were easy when you assumed the future was guaranteed. His thoughts shifted to his failed marriage, to the quiet arguments that ended in silence rather than resolution. He had mistaken that silence for peace, not recognizing it as distance slowly becoming permanent. He had chosen certainty over connection, depth over presence, work over vulnerability. 10%. The regret did not come as panic or despair. It came calmly, settling into him like truth finally acknowledged. "If there is a God," he whispered, voice barely audible inside the helmet, "I don't know how to speak to you, but if you're listening, please take care of my daughter." 5%. His vision softened at the edges, the world narrowing as if gently closing. Adam stopped resisting the moment, floating there in the deepest darkness he had ever known, believing with quiet certainty that he was completely alone, and that his final breath was close at hand. At first, Adam thought his senses were betraying him. Oxygen deprivation could do that, distort perception, create illusions where none existed. Yet, as his vision blurred at the edges, something in the darkness refused to disappear. A faint glow shimmered ahead, low to the seabed, steady and calm. It was not the harsh yellow of his helmet light, nor the cold reflection of metal. This light was different, soft, golden, almost warm, as though it carried intention rather than illumination. Adam turned his head slowly, afraid that sudden movement might break the illusion. The glow remained. 5%. His breathing slowed instinctively, not from discipline this time, but from a strange sense of stillness that settled over him. He drifted as far as the trapped umbilical would allow and extended his arm toward the source. His gloved fingers brushed sand, sending a small cloud of sediment into the water. Beneath it, the glow intensified, clearer now, as if inviting him closer. With deliberate effort, he began to dig, pushing aside layers of sand and silt that had rested undisturbed for years. His hand touched something solid, not steel, not stone. He pulled gently, then more firmly, and the object came free. It was a book at the bottom of the ocean, bound, intact, and impossibly radiant. Water streamed from its cover, yet the pages did not dissolve, did not tear. Instead, they remained whole, protected, as though untouched by the sea itself. Adam brought it closer, his heart pounding harder than it had during the entire crisis. Intricate patterns marked the cover, and the script upon it was unfamiliar, elegant, deliberate. Though he could not read a single word, something deep within him recognized its gravity. This was not debris. This was not chance. 3%. Adam held the book against his chest, cradling it without knowing why. As he did, a profound calm washed over him, dissolving the fear that had tightened its grip on his mind. The panic that had hovered at the edge of his thoughts vanished, replaced by a peace so complete it felt unreal. It was as if the ocean itself had grown quiet, as if the crushing weight around him had loosened. 2%. Tears formed unbidden inside his helmet, blurring his vision as he rested his forehead briefly against the cover. "If you are real," he whispered, voice shaking, "I don't know your name. I don't know your words, but I am listening." 1%. His lungs burned, his body heavy, yet his heart felt light for the first time in years. Then, without warning, a sharp mechanical click cut through the silence. Adam's eyes snapped open. The oxygen gauge read 0. And yet air surged into the regulator, cold, forceful, undeniable. He gasped as life flooded back into his lungs, breath after breath filling him with strength that should not have existed. The emergency valve, jammed, immovable moments before, had unlocked on its own. Adam stared down at the book in his hands, the golden light slowly fading, but not disappearing, and understood with trembling certainty that something beyond reason had just intervened. The return of air felt unreal, as though his body had been pulled back from a place it had already crossed into. Adam inhaled sharply, then again, each breath burning as oxygen flooded his lungs. He coughed, steadied himself, and forced his breathing into control. The gauge on his wrist still showed 0, a silent contradiction to the rush of air sustaining him. He did not question it. Whatever logic had ruled his world until now had clearly been suspended. Survival demanded action, not explanation. The umbilical remained trapped, stretched tight between steel and concrete, as immovable as before. Adam followed it with his eyes, confirming what he already knew. There was no freeing it. The structure had settled into its new position, sealing his lifeline in place. He looked down at the book in his hands, its presence grounding him in a way he could not explain. He secured it carefully against his chest, tightening a strap to keep it from drifting away. Losing it felt unthinkable, not because of what it was, but because of what it represented. It had appeared when nothing else remained. Adam reached for the knife mounted on his thigh. Cutting the umbilical was a decision drilled into him as an absolute last resort, a line never crossed unless death was already certain. Moments ago, that line had been unavoidable. Now, impossibly, he had air. He positioned the blade, hesitated for a fraction of a second, then sliced through the hose in one clean motion. The severed line recoiled slightly, then went slack. With the tether gone, buoyancy lifted him gently, and he adjusted his suit controls to stabilize himself. Disorientation followed immediately. Without the umbilical as a guide, the darkness swallowed direction. At this depth, distance meant nothing. The ocean erased landmarks and distorted memory. Adam closed his eyes briefly, then opened them and focused, replaying the descent in his mind. He remembered the angle of approach, the slope of the seabed, the position of the support column he had circled earlier. Memory became his compass. He turned carefully and began to swim. Each movement was measured, conserving energy and air. He did not know how much oxygen the emergency reserve could provide or how long the impossible flow would last. The water around him remained black and silent, broken only by drifting particles and the occasional outline of industrial debris emerging and vanishing again. He corrected course when needed, trusting instinct where the certainty failed. As he moved, he became aware of the steady pressure of the book against his chest. It anchored him, calming the frantic edge of his thoughts. For most of his life, Adam had trusted redundancy, multiple systems, layered safeguards. Now, at the edge of survival, it was something unseen and unmeasurable that steadied him most. Then his helmet lights caught a faint reflection ahead. At first, he dismissed it as another trick of light, but it grew clearer with each stroke. Illumination. Distant, muted, but unmistakable. He angled toward it, heart pounding harder despite his effort to remain calm. The shape resolved slowly, the capsule's exterior lights, dim but real, cutting a small island of visibility into the surrounding void. Relief surged through him. He pushed harder, ignoring the ache in his limbs. The capsule grew larger, its open hatch a dark oval, rimmed with light. As he reached it, the airflow began to thin, the regulator's resistance changing in a way he recognized instantly. Time compressed again. Adam pulled himself inside, boots scraping metal, and slammed the emergency close control. The hatch sealed with a pneumatic hiss that echoed through the chamber. He collapsed onto the floor, chest heaving, one hand instinctively resting over the book secured against him. Alive. He lay there, listening to the capsule's systems stabilize, knowing with absolute certainty that whatever had found him beneath the sand had not done so by chance, and that his life had crossed a point from which there was no returning unchanged. The ascent back toward the surface unfolded slowly, governed by strict decompression protocols that could not be rushed, no matter what Adam had just survived. Inside the sealed capsule, pressure adjusted in careful stages, metal walls humming softly as systems did their work. Adam sat with his back against the curve of the chamber, helmet removed now, breathing normal air that felt almost unfamiliar. His hands trembled slightly, not from exhaustion, but from the delayed weight of what had happened. Beneath the layers of procedure and routine, something fundamental had shifted, and he could feel it settling into place. When Surface Control re-established communication, their voices sounded distant, oddly thin. Questions came quickly, overlapping, about the structural movement, the umbilical failure, the emergency reserve. Adam answered what he could in calm, professional terms. He described the mechanical sequence, the decisions he had made the moment he cut the line. He did not mention the light. He did not mention the book. Not because he feared disbelief, but because the experience felt too intact, too personal, to reduce to technical language. Some truths, he sensed, were not meant to be processed like incident reports. Medical checks followed as soon as the capsule locked into the pressurized living system. Vital signs were monitored, reflexes tested, questions asked about dizziness, confusion, and memory gaps. Adam complied patiently. Physically, he was fine. Remarkably fine. The doctors exchanged glances that said more than their words did. Surviving a situation like his usually left marks: cognitive fog, lingering weakness, trauma. Adam felt none of that. What he felt instead was clarity, sharp and unsettling. When he was finally alone in his quarters, the platform quieted by the steady rhythm of night operations, Adam retrieved the book from where it had been carefully stored. The Quran rested in his hands with a weight that had nothing to do with mass. He placed it on the narrow desk and sat across from it, elbows on his knees, studying it as if it might move or speak on its own. The room felt different with it there. Not charged, not dramatic, just still. The kind of stillness he had felt beneath the ocean when fear had released its grip. He did not open it yet. Instead, he leaned back and stared at the ceiling, replaying the moment when he had expected to die. What disturbed him most was not how close he had come to the end, but how unafraid he had been when he thought the end had arrived. That peace had not come from resignation, it had come from presence, something steady meeting him in the darkness. Over the next days, word spread quietly among the crew. Adam had survived a situation that should not have been survivable. People called him lucky, shook their heads, clapped his shoulder in passing. Adam accepted the reactions with a faint smile, but luck felt like the wrong explanation. Luck was random. What he had experienced felt precise. One evening, as he walked the narrow corridor toward the mess hall, Adam passed Yusuf Rahman, the systems analyst he had nodded to before the descent. Yusuf paused, studied Adam's face, then said simply, "You look like someone who has been answered." Adam stopped walking. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Adam nodded slowly, unsure how else to respond. He did not yet have the language for what had happened to him. But he knew this much. Whatever had reached him beneath the sea had followed him back to the surface, and it was not finished with him yet. When Adam finally returned to land, the world felt louder than he remembered. The harbor roared with engines, horns, and voices layered over one another, yet he moved through it as if wrapped in a thin shell of quiet. The city lights seemed too bright, the air too light, gravity almost unfamiliar after weeks governed by pressure and protocol. His apartment greeted him with the same sparse order he had left behind. Clean surfaces, minimal furniture, a life arranged for brief returns rather than presence. He set his bag down and stood still for a moment, listening to the silence between sounds, aware that something essential had followed him home. He took the Quran from its protective wrapping and placed it carefully on a shelf at eye level. It looked out of place among ordinary objects, books he had skimmed, devices he barely used, but its presence changed the room. Not dramatically, not with spectacle, but with a calm that felt earned rather than imposed. That night, sleep came in fragments. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw the golden light beneath the sand, felt the rush of air when none should have existed. Instead of pushing the memory away, he allowed it to settle, unresolved but honest. The next morning, curiosity overcame hesitation. Adam reached out to Yusuf, asking if they could talk. They met at a quiet cafe near the waterfront, the smell of coffee and salt water mingling in the air. Adam told the story simply, no embellishment, no conclusions, describing the depth, the failure, the moment when certainty ended. Yusuf listened without interruption. When Adam finished, Yusuf nodded and said, "If you want to understand the Quran, begin by listening. Not to prove anything, not to argue, just listen." He offered Adam a translated copy and suggested starting slowly, a few pages at a time. Adam took the advice seriously. Each evening, he read in short sessions, sometimes only a paragraph. He did not rush. Some passages confused him, others unsettled him with their directness. Then there were lines that felt uncannily precise, speaking to trial, patience, accountability, and mercy in ways that mirrored his own experience. He found himself pausing often, rereading, sitting with the words long after closing the book. The act felt less like studying and more like being addressed. Small changes followed. Adam became more deliberate with his time, less reactive to distractions. He called his daughter more often, not to check a box, but to be present. Their conversations grew longer, warmer. One evening, he apologized, not dramatically, not defensively, for being absent. The relief he felt afterwards surprised him. The words had been waiting, and once spoken, they left room behind. He began asking questions, real ones, about purpose, about surrender, about what it meant to trust something beyond calculation. Yusuf answered patiently, never pressing for conclusions. "Faith isn't a switch," he said once. "It's a direction." That idea stayed with Adam. Direction mattered more than certainty. Late one night, Adam realized he was no longer reading as an observer. He was reading as someone being guided. The ocean had stripped him of control. What followed offered orientation. He did not yet know where the path would lead, but he knew he had stepped onto it willingly. And for the first time in years, the future felt less like an escape route and more like a return. In the weeks that followed, Adam felt as though his life had entered a quiet but relentless current, carrying him forward whether he resisted or not. The questions that had once lived at the edges of his thoughts now sat at the center of his days. He woke earlier, not out of habit, but with a sense of intention he had never known before. He found himself reflecting on his actions, his words, even his silences, measuring them against something deeper than efficiency or success. The Quran was no longer an unfamiliar book on a shelf. It had become a companion, one that challenged him without accusation and guided him without force. Adam spent long evenings talking with Yusuf, sometimes in cafes, sometimes walking along the shoreline where the ocean stretched endlessly before them. He asked about belief, about responsibility, about what it truly meant to submit, not to fear, not to pressure, but to truth. Yusuf answered carefully, never dramatizing, never simplifying. He spoke of accountability not as punishment, but as clarity, of worship not as ritual alone, but as alignment between belief and action. What struck Adam most was how little Yusuf tried to convince him. There was no urgency, no demand, only patience. One night, sitting alone in his apartment, Adam reread passages he had marked weeks earlier, verses about guidance coming to those who seek it sincerely, about light appearing after hardship, about life as a test not meant to break a person, but to reveal them. The words no longer felt abstract. They felt personal. He thought again of the moment beneath the ocean, when fear had dissolved into peace, when something unseen had met him at the edge of his end. For the first time, Adam allowed himself to name it. Not coincidence, not luck, but mercy. The realization did not arrive with fireworks or overwhelming emotion. It came quietly, like certainty settling into place. Adam understood that belief was no longer something he was circling around. It was something he had already stepped into. The direction Yusuf had spoken of had become clear. A few days later, Adam asked Yusuf if they could talk privately. They sat together in a simple, quiet space. No audience, no ceremony. Adam spoke honestly, without rehearsed words, about the ocean, about the book, about the change within him. When he finished, Yusuf nodded and asked gently, "Do you believe there is no God but Allah and that Muhammad is his messenger?" Adam felt a calm he recognized immediately, the same calm he had felt when the golden light surrounded him in the darkness. He answered without hesitation, "Yes." The words felt weightless and heavy all at once, not an ending, but a beginning. Adam learned how to pray, slowly and imperfectly. His movements were awkward at first, his pronunciation uncertain, but the act itself felt grounding. Each prayer marked time not by urgency, but by presence. He found that discipline did not restrict him. It freed him. The structure he had once sought in steel and systems now existed within him. He told his daughter about the changes in his life gently, without pressure, simply sharing his peace. He became more present, more consistent. He did not promise perfection. He promised effort, and this time he meant it. Adam Rivers had gone into the ocean as a man who trusted only what he could measure. He emerged as someone who understood that the most powerful truths are often found where measurement ends. And though the sea still called him back for work, he knew now that his deepest descent had already led him upward. Adam's life did not transform overnight into something dramatic or effortless. He still returned offshore. He still worked with steel, pressure, and numbers. The ocean remained dangerous, indifferent, and vast. But Adam was no longer the same man who descended into it. Something essential had shifted, not in his profession, but in his center. He carried purpose now, not as a concept, but as a compass. Each descent felt different, not safer, but steadier, as if he knew why he would return if he did. On his first rotation back at sea after accepting Islam, Adam stood alone on the deck before dawn, watching the horizon slowly pale. He whispered a quiet prayer, awkward in its words but sincere in its intent. The ocean stretched endlessly before him, the same ocean that had nearly taken his life. Instead of fear, he felt gratitude. Not because he had been spared, but because he had been guided. He no longer saw survival as an accident. He saw it as responsibility. The Quran traveled with him now, carefully wrapped, always placed respectfully in his quarters. It had become his anchor in a world defined by motion. On long nights offshore, when the platform hummed and the sea rolled unseen below, Adam read by dim light, reflecting on verses that spoke of trust, patience, and accountability. He no longer searched for proof. He searched for alignment between belief and action, intention and behavior. His relationship with his daughter deepened in ways he had once thought impossible. He listened more than he spoke. When he was present, he was truly there. He did not promise grand futures. He built consistency instead. Calls that were kept, visits that were honored, apologies that were followed by change. Lena noticed. Children always do. The distance between them softened, not because the past disappeared, but because the future felt safer. Adam also became quieter in his faith. He did not preach. He did not argue. When colleagues asked about the change in him, he answered simply, "I found clarity where I expected the end." Some nodded, some smiled politely, some asked questions. Adam answered when asked and stayed silent when not. Guidance, he had learned, was not something forced. It arrived when hearts were ready. Sometimes, late at night, Adam thought back to the seabed, the trapped umbilical, the falling numbers, the moment he had surrendered control. He understood now that surrender had not been weakness, it had been honesty. The ocean had stripped him down to truth, and truth had met him there with mercy. He knew there would be more trials ahead. Faith had not removed hardship from his life. It had given hardship meaning. He no longer feared losing control because he no longer believed control was his to begin with. Adam Rivers had gone into the deepest darkness believing he was alone, believing that life was measured only by systems and calculations. He returned with a certainty that could not be graphed or tested, that guidance reaches even the most unreachable places, and that when a person turns sincerely toward truth, truth responds. The ocean still lay beneath him, vast and powerful. But Adam knew now that the deepest depths he had ever faced were not beneath the surface of the sea, they were within himself. And it was there in complete surrender that he had finally learned how to rise.